Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeanne Pimental, and I'm so happy to be here in this wonderful place. I was not born in Oakland either. In fact, I traveled all the way around the world before I even got to California. But I was brought up in an all-white suburb of London, England. But I always wanted to travel. I wanted to see different people and faraway places, like in all those books that I was reading. And one of my heroes was David Livingstone. He was an explorer who had discovered the magnificent Victoria Falls in Africa. And one thing I liked about him was he talked with such admiration about the African natives, without whom he couldn't possibly have done this expedition. They were so skillful. See, I never actually met a black person until I was 16 years old in a suburb of London. It wasn't until I went into central London where there were a few people like that. So I thought of people of color as attractive and interesting. So when I was 21, I was ready. I was going to see the world. The trouble is that I didn't have any money, so I couldn't go just wherever I wanted. The only place I could afford to go was Australia, because Australia was a huge country. They needed more people. They wanted young, white people who could work like me. So they paid the passage. You got there for free. Well, that was fine. There was plenty of land to explore, doing my explorations, but the Australian people were kind of boringly white. Well, that's except for the Aborigines, but they were kept isolated in this corner of North Australia and treated abominably. But that's another story. So while I was in Australia, I met Frank, a handsome young American, who was perfectly happy to travel wherever I wanted to in the world if I would marry him. So I did. The trouble is, he said, well, first of all, we do have to go back to California to visit my mother because she's sick before we take her. Well, I never wanted to go to America. That was just another mostly white, English-speaking country. I had no interest. But, okay, we'll go visit. And, however, there was something. I had seen the movie Carmen Jones, you know, the version of the opera where it's set in Louisiana, and it had an all-black cast. People like Harry Belafonte, Dorothy Dandridge. I thought, well, maybe I'll meet people like that. Because, you see, my husband then was a folk singer, so he was in with people of the performing arts, and I knew he had a lot of black friends. So I did meet a lot of interesting people, not quite that famous perhaps, but because, as fate would have it, and that's another whole story, we never did get away. We didn't get away for a long, long time. We stayed in California, after all. And I've lived on and off in the Bay Area ever since I came from Australia in 1959. So I have got to know black people, though, in America. And I've been so lucky. I've had opportunities in work and through common interests and common friends and all sorts of ways. I found myself going with friends to Juneteenth parties and gospel church services and political rallies. And even eating chitlins after a New Year's Eve party. Well, at times, you know, I was the only white person in these places, and I felt isolated. I felt sometimes shunned. But you know what that taught me was that there was nothing compared with being in a minority on the other way round. And that's so unjust. Well, I didn't get back to Africa. I didn't get to Africa at all until 1972. And at that time, with my second husband, he got a work opportunity to go to Ghana. He was a teacher. And there Ghana was a former British colony but it had achieved independence and it was self-governing. So there we stayed with friends and were able to interact with the local community. And one thing that struck me was that the black people there seemed to have a certain sort of pride and confidence. And I think it was because they knew they were in charge, they were governing. And also they had such pride in their ancient heritage, which most African countries do have. Well, also in Ghana, I heard the drums from a distant village playing that, essentially, that very special African rhythm. And I fell in love with African music. I've been passionate about African music ever since. Well, decades later, here in Oakland, I happened to meet Julia Chikamba and her Chinyakari ensemble of performers. Julia was born in Zimbabwe, but she came to Oakland and created a dance troupe here. And her mission was to preserve the dance and music and the whole culture of the Shona people of Zimbabwe. And so I got talking to her and I told her, oh, I'd love to go to Zimbabwe. You know, she arranged for me to go and stay with her father in Zimbabwe. Now, Sekuru Tute Chikamba was not only an accomplished musician, her father, and well-traveled and educated person, but he was a respected elder and the head of his community, his extended family and other people community. So when he welcomed me there, I just lived in that community for 2 weeks, just like one of them, and I felt so welcome. Oh, and I did take a little side trip to see the Victoria Falls, because they happened to be at the edge of Zimbabwe. And when I came home, oh, was I welcome. I'd been to the homeland. I was really welcome in the Chinyakari ensemble, the community of this tribe. It's more than just the troupe, it's the whole community. A very diverse community in Oakland. And you know, in both places, in Zimbabwe and here, the children, and the adults, they call me Gogo Jeanne, and Gogo is Shona for grandma. So that's who I am. Well, that's in East Oakland. As for West Oakland, it just happens that I was conscious of West Oakland way, way long ago. Soon after I came here in the early 60s, my husband then, Frank, and I, we were both involved, we were both in the film industry. And we were making a film about Matson Shipping Lines, who had just introduced container ships. And those container ships were essentially responsible for the decline of the port of San Francisco, it's a major port, and the rise of the port of Oakland. And, so at that time, I saw they had just two of these great giant cranes. They looked to me like iron horses when you see them from the Bay Bridge, just two of them. Now there's a whole city of them over there. But as for then, that was about all I knew about West Oakland then. But decades later, I took a course at Laney College here on the history of Oakland. And I discovered what went before, the whole history of this area, how it came to be, the culture, the architecture, and also how West Oakland used to be really a hub of the wonderful African jazz, the wonderful black jazz culture that was here. And so I was really interested in that. At that time, though, I took the course, but I didn't have time to walk around and explore the whole area as I would like to. But much later, lots later, just recently, somehow everything seems to have conspired to bring me here. Like somehow a lot of more of my black friends, like Julia, live in Oakland. She's in East Oakland. But, and then I decided to pursue my early love of acting, and there was this wonderful place in Oakland called Stagebridge. And when I heard that my wonderful friend Ben Tucker was offering this course, it sounded really intriguing. And particularly so because just at that time I had heard from my friend Elisa that one of the was those jazz venues of the past, Esther's Orbit Room, was going to be reopened, and she was very involved in that. So I thought, okay. And I started really exploring this area. Oh my goodness. I found such a variety, contrasting cultures and some very unique features. But at its heart, there's this kind of sense of community that was unlike anything I'd seen anywhere else. First of all, of course, I looked at the port, the modern port, which is between the bay and the freeway. Oh my goodness, it's like another planet. Miles and miles of this landscape, which is nothing but berths. There are over 50 berths for freight. It is the capital of the freight industry here. There are over 50 berths. There are miles and miles of just railroad sidings and containers piled high, over 1,000, I think there must be. Then that's between. Then this extension of the freeway that serves the port. Underneath that freeway is one of the biggest homeless encampments in this area. And it's so big that the people there, when they're left alone, self-organize and become a community of themselves. Then beyond that freeway, inland of the freeway, there's this network I found of regular residential homes, and oh my goodness, so many beautiful Victorian buildings. There are more per square mile than in any district in San Francisco, which is supposed to be so picturesque with Victorian buildings. And that, I realized, was because of the past of West Oakland there, when it had been a very upscale residential district before the industrialization. And then I also found and peppered in between these beautiful Victorian houses and the historic churches and the historic parks, there were libraries and community centers that just gave me the feeling these people here really come together as a community. And also I found that there were artist studios proliferating here, and music venues. And of course I went to find Esther's Orbit Room. There was this old stone facade which the building had almost been demolished because the BART tracks came right through there and it had been abandoned. But I found that now it had been acquired by a local co-op organization which is going to reopen it as not only a performance space, but it's going to have low-income apartments for artists and other people. And it's just going to be its own community. And to me, it just symbolizes West Oakland.